Welcome to today's episode of Voices of the Elders. I am Elderic Soren. Nobody wakes up one morning and finds their marriage cold. The cold does not arrive in one night. The cooling takes years. I want to speak today about a kind of dying that happens while everyone is still alive. Not the dying of love. Not the dying of intention. But the dying of attention, what the world calls emotional neglect. Most people who suffer it never name it while it is happening. It does not look like cruelty. It does not feel like a decision. It arrives as absence. I have sat in rooms like this one. Perhaps not this exact room, but rooms with this temperature. And I have tried to understand how the warmth left. It wasn't broken in a moment. It just cooled slowly. In the early years of a marriage, there is an abundance of attention. You notice each other. You ask questions and wait for the answer. You look. And then, life arrives with its weight. The work, the children, the money that is never quite enough, the tiredness that is always more than expected. The questions shorten. The silences lengthen. The looking stops. And for a long time, nobody noticed. Because both people were equally busy not looking. That is the first stage. Distraction. It does not yet feel like neglect. But the person beside you, the one who was once looked at completely, begins to ask a question they do not speak aloud. Do you still see me? Not with anger at first, not with accusation, but with something quieter. A withdrawal, a turning inward, a decision made without deciding to stop offering themselves to be seen. Because offering yourself to be seen and not being received is a wound on its own. And a wound inflicted many times on someone teaches the person to stop reaching out. The second stage is the most dangerous because it looks like peace. The fighting stops, the tension drops, the house becomes quieter, polite, functional, but distant. Two people sharing a life the way two strangers share a corridor. And they call it peace. But this can never be peace. It was simply the exhaustion of two people who had stopped trying to be seen by each other. Emotional neglect never announces itself. No one decides to neglect the person they chose. No one names it on the day it begins. The grief here is not loud. It happens in the accumulated days of choosing other things. The television over a conversation, the phone over the question, the sleep over an acknowledgement. Each one a small choice, but across a decade, a direction. And that direction was away from each other. A person being emotionally neglected does not always leave. That is what makes it so difficult. They stay because they remember, because they hope, because leaving feels like the final admission. and so they remain in the room. But a version of themselves has already left. And one day the sleeping becomes separate. And neither of them can say exactly why or when. That has to become the arrangement. Not a decision, just a drift. This is what slow death looks like from the inside. No argument, no catastrophe, no single villain in the story. Just only two people who became strangers across the accumulated distance of ordinary days. Is this your marriage right now? Is some version of this what your house contains? If you can still feel the cold, you are not too late. You can do something now. A cold that can be felt can be named. A cold that can be named can be addressed. What it requires is not a grand gesture. It requires one honest conversation. The conversation where someone finally says, "I feel like I have become invisible to you." That is the first. The question I am asked most often about this subject is, how did it get this far without anyone stopping it? The answer is always gradually. 1 degree, then another. The answer is always gradually, then another, then another. Each degree seemed survivable. No single degree looked large enough to register as emergency. Until you look up one morning and realize it is already winter. The most honest thing I can say to a person in this kind of situation is that the warmth is still possible, but it requires someone to say something true before it becomes impossible. Before the words stop being available, before the silence becomes the permanent language. It must be spoken. Before the door is not simply closed, but locked from the inside. Most marriages that end in silence do not end because the love disappeared. It did not happen in one moment, but cooled so gradually. They end because some conversations did not happen. They didn't hold. People often ask what the conversation should sound like. But the answer is simpler than they expect. It sounds like the truth. Like this: I miss you. I feel far from you. I do not know when the distance arrived, but I want to close it. Can we work on it? 4 sentences. They are enough. If they are true, they are more than enough. What stops most people is not the absence of feeling. It is fear. The fear that the other person will not respond. The fear that it is too late already. The fear that saying it will reveal how far the distance has grown. These are real fears, and every one of them is worth taking anyway. Because the risk of the conversation is always smaller than the cost of the silence. Always. Worst case, the other person is not ready. Best case, they have been waiting for exactly this. Because very often, the person on the other side of the distance has been waiting too. Waiting for someone to say something true first. waiting for the permission that the first honest word gives. Two people waiting for the other to speak, both of them silent, both of them cold. Someone has to speak first. That is all. Someone just has to speak first. It does not have to be eloquent. It does not have to arrive fully formed. It only has to be honest. Even just, I am cold and I want to be warm again. That sentence, offered honestly, is a door. And doors offered honestly are almost always still openable. But they do not stay openable every day. That is the one thing I want you to learn from this. There is a point at which the door becomes a wall, at which the conversation is no longer available. And nobody knows in advance when that point arrives. Nobody is given any warning. And one morning, one partner looks at the other and realizes, the marriage ended long ago. We missed it. Do not let that morning be the first morning you understood what was still here. Understand it now. While the warmth is still possible, while the door is still a door. Look at what is beside you, or at what is no longer beside you. Both of those things are telling you something about where you are, about what is required, about how much time remains. Every one of those things has an answer, but the answer requires a voice. Yours. That is why I am speaking to those who can still feel the cold. Not those whose room has already been emptied, but those who still sleep in the same house, still eat at the same table, even though they still share the same ordinary days that have quietly become extraordinary in their distance. The warmth is still possible. Listen carefully. This is the moment. Do not leave this room and return to the silence. The silence is already familiar enough. It does not need your company tonight. What needs your company is the unfamiliar conversation, the honest sentence, the acknowledged distance, the invitation back towards each other. That conversation belongs to tonight. Say it clumsily if you must. Say it imperfectly if you must. But say it while the room is still shared, while there is still someone there to hear it. Because someday this bed will teach you the value of warmth. And the lesson is much easier to learn while it is still possible. Do not trust the convenience of tomorrow. Trust the conversation that is possible tonight. The person beside you does not need your perfection. They need your presence, your honest presence. And presence should never be withheld until the room is empty of the one who really needed it. If the warmth is still possible, go toward it. Tonight, not some other time. To get further insight on this subject, pick up a copy of this book, Married but Alone. How to recognize the slow death of emotional neglect, stop it before it's too late, and bring your marriage back to life. The link to it is in the bio section of this video. See you in the next episode. Please subscribe to my channel Like and share this video to help failing marriages. Thank you.